David Clark.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the members' wide-ranging and interesting contribution. I intend to focus on the title and commencement debate myself, but I understand now that the debate has been broadened, so I wouldn't wish to limit any other colleagues that wanted to expand their portfolio of complaints against the government beyond those that you might expect to find in a tax bill. Mr. Chair, this bill does it confirm the existing tax structure. In that, the Minister is correct. It affirms the tax structure that we have currently that sees this government borrowing more money than any other government in New Zealand history. This is the government that has borrowed more than any other government in New Zealand history. And so it is a bit rich. It is a bit rich for that Minister to come to the House and talk about tax and spend Labour Party. His government has borrowed more than Muldoon's government. That is how shameless they have been. They have returned one surplus despite years and years and years and years of promises. They have but delivered one surplus to this country, and it was manufactured. This is the borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow and hope government. This government right here in the House that is pushing through a bill which they are borrowing to pay for. And we are being asked to support it. And let me make it clear, we will support it on the basis that we need a robust tax system, that the remedial changes in this bill help to make our tax system more robust. But we do not support the rates of tax in there that they push through to ensure that the wealthiest 10% got 40% of the value of their 2010 tax cuts. The wealthiest 10% got 40% of the value, while those earning the bottom 20% got just 2%. Just 2%, Mr. Chair, of the value of those tax cuts. And of course, we know at the same time, John Key broke his promise. That was the start of many broken promises. He broke his promise not to put up GST. And that meant that though the very modest pay increase that people thought they were getting with that initial tax cut, those at the bottom of the tax structure and in the middle of the tax structure thought they were getting, was swallowed up immediately in that GST increase. So of course, this change that they made in 2010, which we're affirming again today, is part of what has driven that growth and inequality under this government, that sees middle New Zealand getting left further and further behind. We're robbed of opportunities, robbed of the Kiwi dream. So I want to suggest a title, Mr. Chair, for this bill, an alternative title, which is to replace the material in brackets with the words suffocating the Kiwi dream. Because that is what this bill does. That is what this bill does. It's one of the things this bill does. It does the remedial matters. I'm happy to leave that part in the title because we support the remedial matters. What we don't support is this constant drip, drip, drip of making sure that the 1% have that little bit more in their pockets, the 1% have that little bit more in the pockets, those who are in the Cabinet In Club get that little bit of extra handout, while those in small business put their own shirts on the line day after day, small business people putting their shirts on the line and face excess regulation under this government, tax changes and child support changes and constant changes and more red tape from this government that cripples middle New Zealand as they try to do their bit to get ahead, all so that the top 1% can have their interests looked after, so that the very, very close friends, the in club of the National Party, can enjoy their lifestyle in Hawaii. Mr. Chair, I want to suggest a second alternative title for this bill, and that is the Can They Deliver bill. Because one of the issues that I don't feel has been covered enough in the debate so far is the history that goes with the child support reforms that we are dealing with here today. Because in here are child support reforms which are, quote, I think the changes intended to reduce the implementation cost. Now, why would the government be trying to reduce the implementation cost of new child support changes? Well, Mr. Chair, the answer is that originally the changes were estimated to cost $30 million. $30 million. And then what happened? In 2014, that was 2011. In 2014, the cost estimate for changes to the child support system blew out to $210 million. That is a seven-fold increase. A seven-fold increase. Is anyone on that side of the House prepared to defend a seven-fold increase in the cost of implementing the child support changes? No. I hear silence opposite. And so it had blown out to $210 million, Mr. Chair.
Dr. David Clark.
It had blown out to $210 million in 2014, and on top of that, the implementation of the child support changes was delayed by a year. And so families that had made arrangements based on the existing child support legislation, including things like putting money into a mortgage or investing in new clothes for their kids because they thought they had a bit more money in their pockets and so on, were forced to go back to the old system and could not necessarily cover the debts for all the changes they had made. That was a treacherous mistake by this government, but it was also a costly one because the taxpayer picks up the extra hundreds of millions of dollars to implement this legislation, and now we're told this bill aims to reduce the implementation costs to $163 million for that legislation. Remember, the original estimate in 2011 was $30 million. Now they're hoping through these changes, which make it a less effective system, I might add, to reduce the cost to $163 million. This is a government that is not across the basic details. They were told years ago in their first briefing to the incoming minister, in fact, Peter Dunn knew it in the previous regime, that the tax system needed to be upgraded. And they have dillied and dallied, and they have taken forever, and they have pushed out the capital spend, and we have a tax system that is creaking. And we now find ourselves in this parliament putting through legislation that a few months later we have to reverse out at all the costs of running legislation through parliament, and they are not insignificant, I might add. This is a government that is not across the basics. And so we ask ourselves, and we could rightfully put in the title, child support changes, can they deliver, Bill? Because I am sceptical. I am sceptical. We have twice brought back changes to this House for child support legislation, and we have seen the costs mount further and further. And the new minister, I wish him well in this responsibility because he does have a challenge ahead of him. It is not his doing in this case, I would say, although there is an element of collective cabinet responsibility, but it goes back beyond this minister, the problems. And he has his work cut out, and I do wish him well in achieving a fair tax system that does the duty that we all want of collecting taxes so that we can afford as a community to supply things like roads and hospitals and schools, those things we all need but could not afford from our own pockets. We need an effective tax system. We need a tax system that collects the revenue to afford those things that we need as a community if we want to live in a modern way and in a way that ensures our future prosperity. Hospitals, schools and roads at its most basic, a justice system and so on. So I wish the minister well with that, but I do question whether this government will be able to deliver on the things that are promised in this bill. And I am also concerned, as I said at the outset of my speech, about the chilling effect of this legislation that is slowly suffocating the Kiwi dream through reinforcing the kinds of tax changes that have driven a 15% anchor on our economy, according to the OECD, over recent decades. That growing inequality, the lowest home ownership rate in 60 years in this country, it's been growing every year under this government. The growing gap between the very well-off and the rest of New Zealand. Those people in middle New Zealand who aspired to own their own home, who might have aspired to own their own business and so on, are struggling more and more and more as this government looks after the interests of a very select in crowd, those who are their closest mates. And we challenge them to try to shift to being a fairer government, but we ask in this bill that consideration be given to the name change of suffocating the Kiwi dream, or can they deliver on the child support promises? Mr. Chair, we will support the bill for the fact that it makes our tax system through the remedial changes more robust to do the basic things a tax system has to do, but we do it with reservations and we put forward those suggestions for consideration. I'm interested to hear whether the minister will consider them in a thoughtful way and respond, because these changes in here are political. They do have an important bearing also on the future shape of our society. Tax bills often are considered not very exciting, but the stuff that goes through in this bill affects every single New Zealander.